Hey guys, it's Gabi Kainov. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to describe to you everything I've learned from a beginner's perspective on starting a social media presence and brand building. Now, obviously I'm still a beginner. A while ago, I read this book, Influencer, by Brittany Hennessy. I hope I said that right. This is a fantastic book. It is a book that I recommend if you want to become an influencer or even a YouTuber or a podcaster or anyone with a social media presence. I highly recommend the book. Now, in the book, she talked about this trifecta, and I read it a while ago, and I don't want to butcher it, but she was saying when marketers are looking to invest with an influencer, the ideal type of influencer will be present on YouTube, on podcasting, or blogging. I don't remember if she said podcasting or blogging, and on Instagram. I want to break down these three platforms and what I kind of wish I did differently if I was restarting everything. Instagram, I've been on for 2 weeks. YouTube, I've been on for about a year. And podcasting, I've been on for, I want to say 7 months. All these three platforms are completely different, and I want to break them down. And at the same time, I also have to say, I took a big break from podcasting and YouTubing because I got married, and just recently, I've been leaning much more heavily into it, and I've already been relatively consistent with podcasting. I have some great episodes out. Go check out the Gabi Kainov podcast, link in the description. If you are anything like me, you've wanted to have a social media presence for a very long time. You hopefully have a positive message and hopefully an entertaining message that you want to share with the world. Now, building that takes time and patience and a lot of practice. I personally believe, is my philosophy, if you put out a good product, something that's withstanding, something that is meaningful and valuable to others, and hopefully valuable to yourself too, just an art that you are proud of, that you are ready to put out, I personally believe that with time, you will be successful and people will hear of you and it will eventually blow up. In addition, you also have to spread these things out. Now, different platforms are better for that than others. And I'll give you an example. The first thing that I want to break down is Instagram. And the reason I'm kind of fanboying over Instagram right now is because I did not realize how powerful Instagram is. I personally was someone that stayed away from social media for a very long time, partly because of religious reasons, but the main reason because I was just very busy and I didn't want to invest a lot of time and energy into social medias where I felt it was so much about meaningless kinds of interactions, and I was just more about being real and real life and all that. And all that stuff is still beautiful. And if you want to stay away from Instagram because there's just a lot of time wasting, like honestly, I'm finding it difficult to put down Instagram sometimes. It's very addictive. At the same time, for being an influencer, it is extremely important. And I'm going to illustrate this with a quick story. I recently had a podcast episode with Zach Adler. Zach Adler is a hilarious, great guy. He is a co-host of Mislabeled, which is an up-and-coming podcast that is getting a lot of relative traction right now. I was really happy to have him because it was just an entertaining episode and hilarious and extremely insightful. We had a really deep philosophical conversation and it was just a good episode. Go check it out. So I sat down with Zach, and after I was picking his brain about growing the podcast and asking him for advice on how to get guests, because they seem to have some big names. They recently had Gary Vee on their podcast, which was like awesome. Now, he basically told me, he's like, Gabi, you have to download Instagram and you'd be surprised. You slide into someone's DMs and you never know where it goes. I took his advice and I downloaded Instagram, and I reconnected with a previous podcast guest I had, Yoel Spielman, who is just an extremely talented magician. You know, a young kid, he's 16. He's somewhat popular. He has a few thousand followers, I believe. Now, basically, Yoel posted a little thing about, hey, we're doing a part 2, me and Gabi, because once we reconnected on Instagram, you know, I mentioned, hey, let's do, I think he even reached out and said, hey, let's do part 2. And I was like, sure. And we did it. And he sent out this reel on his story or whatever it was. And boom, overnight, the podcast hit another 100 downloads, 5,200 downloads, just like overnight, like nothing. I realized how important and integral Instagram is. Now, here's the problem though. I feel that a lot of people use platforms incorrectly. Now, I'm just a beginner, so whatever, take it or leave it. I feel that the way to use Instagram is to use Instagram for what it's meant for. And Instagram is much more about shorter messages. You know, right now they're heavily focusing on Reels, which is a minute to a minute and a half. So your messages have to be shorter and more entertaining and cut out all the nonsense and just like, boom, brief message. It's also much more about lifestyle. So that's another thing that you're going to have to put out. You know, I'm a little bit against putting out lifestyle because I feel like it would be easy to post pictures of the best times in my life. Meanwhile, I don't feel like, am I actually adding something positive to other people's lives? Is that really consistent with my brand? Is that something that I really want to share? That's something I think about. But I see other friends of mine that have Instagram and they use it amazingly. Like Yoel uses it to show off his magic. And my other friend, Ephraim Faziev, He uses Instagram to show off his beautiful art, and that's awesome. And I kind of decided that I would use Instagram to inspire people to go to the gym. And when I walk to the gym, I kind of like go live and I post like a little inspirational story and say we're all champions, because actually, like, no joke, every day after I go to the gym, I look in the mirror and I'm like, you're a champion, and you're a champion. So that's what I do. And I figured I'll give some inspiration, and that'll kind of like be my thing on Instagram. But that is very different from YouTubing. I'm not going to take my YouTube and post it on Instagram. I'm not going to take my podcast and post it on Instagram. Now, when I do come out with a new episode of my podcast or of a YouTube video, I will go ahead and then also post that on Instagram. But I find it weird when people solely use their Instagram to promote their podcast, and they're just taking clips from their podcast and putting it on into Instagram, clips from their YouTube videos and just posting it onto Instagram. Instagram is its own platform that should be used for Instagramming. And the same thing with YouTube. With YouTube, a lot of people take their podcast and then they just post it on YouTube. That's important because YouTube is becoming a platform for podcasting, and it's a very important platform for growing your podcast. So therefore, yes, post your podcast on YouTube, but I wouldn't call you a YouTuber if you take your podcast and then post it on YouTube. Being a YouTuber is about this. This is what being a YouTuber is about. You look in front of the camera, and you talk to the camera, and you make a YouTube video. They're visual elements. That's what being a YouTuber is about. And it's the same thing. I'm not going to take my YouTube videos and then post it on my podcast, because a podcast is meant for a podcast platform. Now, there are people that have monologue podcasts, like my friend, Aaron Steinberg, who's the host of the Always Nuanced podcast. I love his stuff. It's just about helping young people find themselves in this world, and it's about giving advice. And he has this great episode called Fear, F-E-A-R, and it was just one of my favorite episodes, and it was really good. Now, that's a good example of a monologue podcast, what Aaron's doing. And he could, in theory, take that podcast and create a visual element of it and put it on YouTube, and it could technically kind of be a YouTube video, but it's still, even then, it's a little different. When you're talking in front of a camera, you're YouTubing. You're being real. It's a different vibe. And so with YouTube, that's what I would have done next. I would have started with Instagram, because Instagram is very much about community building and reaching out to people and getting to know people. Instagram is amazing for connecting with people. People can comment and reach out to you, and it's great. And YouTube, the next thing that I really like about YouTube, that YouTube is really important, is that the virality aspect of YouTube. Way easier to make it big on YouTube than it is to get big on podcasting. And it's maybe easier to get big on Instagram than it is on YouTube. I'm not really sure. And not only that, YouTube is also extremely important because it allows you to share larger messages. Now, the eventual goal of where I want to go with YouTube is to create my own brand, similar to what Charisma on Command is doing. Not exactly their style. I want mine to be a little bit more mental health focused, but that similar thing where it's a charismatic tone, charismatic YouTubing style video, and then, those awesome visual elements that Charisma on Command is so good at. So that's kind of what I want to do. And that's why YouTube is so amazing, because you can do stuff like that and post these larger videos and share messages in ways that you can't do the same way in Instagram. And you can't even do it the same way in podcasting. With YouTubing, it's a little more polished. With podcasting, at least the style that I have with podcasting, it's about conversations. The benefit that I found about podcasting is that it's longer. It's more interview form. And you sit down with someone for 2 hours and you squeeze out a message. Now, that's not going to sound as polished, but it is going to sound more real. When you're sitting down with someone and you're talking, you get that sense like, oh, they're having a conversation. They're figuring it out as they go. And that's what I love about podcasting. It's two heads, well, at least the interview style that I'm doing. It's two heads bumping together, collaborating, challenging each other, arguing to come out with a pure message that can be shared with the public. And that is the beauty of podcasting. And that's why I kind of want to be successful in all three, because all three of them are amazing tools for spreading messages, for building your brand, and all three of them can work together. But even though they can work together, they do not automatically work together. I will give you a quick example. I started on YouTube. By the time I started my podcast, I had 5,000 views in my biggest episode. My subscriber count currently is 300 something subscribers and hopefully growing. Now, my podcasting, it's great. I think my podcasting is the best thing that I've put out. My podcasts are fantastic quality. The audio is, fancy equipment. I use AIs to even make the sound quality even better. ChatGPT writes all my descriptions. The cover art is great. Everything is great about it. However, it's extremely difficult to blow up in podcasting. And even though I had, I guess, moderate success on YouTube, I would not consider it at all successful, like meaning I'm still very much a beginner. I'm not even monetized yet. But I saw, wow, I put out videos once a week and boom, one of my videos actually, got like 5,000 views. At this point, I'd started my podcast and my podcast hit 200 downloads or 100 downloads. And it was still huge. 100 downloads, listening to my conversation with Aaron Steinberg, the host of the Always Nuanced podcast, 100 downloads in our first week is a huge success. People listen to us for 2 hours. They love the episode. And then all the other episodes I put out subsequently, they loved it. But at the same time, it's like I put out a YouTube video and I know that within a few weeks, you get consistent, the video is good enough, it's going to have 100, 200 views and possibly even get to 1,000, possibly even get to 10,000 and possibly get to even more if you're consistent enough and going long enough and improving enough. But the virality of podcasting, a lot slower. And then alternatively also with Instagram, it's much easier for people to see a 1-minute message than it is for them to bump into your video. Like I just put out an Instagram reel last night and in the first hour it had like 70 something views, which is crazy. As opposed to like YouTube, it could take a week to get to 70 something views. And the more popular you are, the quicker it goes. But guys, I just do want to say those little small victories are victories and they need to be celebrated. If 5 people downloaded your podcast, that is something to be celebrated. 5 people heard your message. People kind of want to hit it big and we kind of get spoiled by the algorithm constantly exposing us to people with millions of views and subscribers and stuff like that. Everyone starts somewhere. Joe Rogan didn't put out his first podcast and it got millions of views. That's not what happened. I don't know how Joe Rogan started and how many views he had in the beginning, but it wasn't that. He started somewhere. Lex Fridman started somewhere. All these famous YouTubers, they started somewhere. The only way you get good at it is to continue to put out. And guys, consistency is extremely important. Not that I know, because I haven't been successful at this yet, because I'm still a beginner, but I know from seeing other platforms grow that it's bizarre. There are certain YouTubers that I remember, they had like 20,000 subscribers when I first started watching their stuff, and then they have 100,000 subscribers like literally 6 months later. Guys, it's about being consistent, and once you start going viral, the ball rolls. I remember that video that when I put out my podcast had 5,000 views. In like the next 2 weeks, it grew up to like 13,000. So once something gets viral, the ball really starts rolling. You jump on that. If I hadn't gotten engaged at the time when I got engaged and that video started blowing up and I jumped on the bandwagon and continued being consistent with the YouTube videos, I have no doubt in my mind I would at least have 1,000 plus subscribers, if not even more, and other videos that hit 10,000 plus views. I have confidence that I'm gonna get there again. I took a break because, like I said, life just got busy. So that's that. But guys, I love you. You're champions. To the rebellion. Go check out the Gabi Kalina podcast. Link in the description. My Instagram. Link in the description. Subscribe. Thank you for watching.